It is Friday, August 26th. Let's talk PlayStation. Yeah, there is no doubt about it. This was another crazy week, a lot to go over. So before we do, let's start as always with our PlayStation Plus reminder. Those PlayStation Plus August Essential games are still live, so go check those out. Also, PlayStation Plus Extra, those games are live as well. And first up, let's actually go over some updates from last week's news stories. First up is the Rollerdrome fiasco, I guess, where that trial on PS Plus Premium was only 35 minutes when it says 1 hour. Private Division responded to PushSquare's inquiry, and they did confirm it's meant to be 35 minutes. It's just that what is listed on the PS Store is meant to be a time estimation. So despite it saying 1 hour, it's a time estimate, which in reality is 35 minutes. Very strange, because that's not a good time estimation. It's nearly half off. So, again, 35 minutes is not bad for Rollerdrome as a trial. That's fine, just reflect that properly on the store. So I don't know why they can't just write that on the PlayStation Store. There must be some sort of presets of 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. I have no clue, but that just seems really strange. Also, SI confirmed to PushSquare that when it comes to the Death Stranding PC Game Pass situation and deal, they were not involved in that whatsoever, so it was completely between 505 Games, Kojima Productions, and Microsoft, which is more or less what we were theorizing last week, that they were not involved in the deal because this title comes from a time where they were not at all concerned about doing PC releases, presumably. So even though 505 Games, we don't know exactly when they were involved in the process of agreeing to publish the PC version of the game, so it's something where they could have been involved much sooner, but it's something where it was likely an era where Sony was not concerned with doing PC releases. And that's the very notable part, because I think we forgot to mention this last week, but it's not the director's cut, so it's very much that base game. And despite 505 being responsible for the director's cut, it is a more recent release of that game, so that might be something where Sony being involved in that process, there might be a new contract in place that stipulates that can't go wherever they want it to go. You know what I mean? So that might explain why there's only the base game on PC Game Pass, because I'm sure Microsoft, if they really wanted to, they would have taken what is a more complete version of the game. But not a surprise, but there is our explanation. Moving on to our next news story, the tournaments feature from PS4 that launched back in 2016 is finally coming to PS5 fairly soon. Of course, Sony's still very committed to the competitive gaming landscape, if that was not obvious from their joint acquisition of Evo. And so the tournaments feature on PS5 is going to be a bit revamped here, where there's some marked improvements, namely an all-new UI, where they're baking the tournaments feature right into the control center and also each game's hub, assuming that the game has tournaments going on. But there's going to be that. There's a dedicated tournaments card letting you easily sign up. And also there's some other improvements like shorter tournament times, real-time match results, things like that. They provided screenshots on their main site, and also there should be a beta rolling out fairly soon, which currently we're in a system software beta, so I would assume that this is part of it, or in some way they'll unlock it server side when eventually this goes live. But I would gather we'll find out more by the end of this year if it is indeed coming very soon. But if you use tournaments on PS4, then it looks like you shouldn't have to wait too long for them to finally launch on PlayStation 5. Next up, we have some pretty big PlayStation VR2 news. Across various social media profiles that Sony operates, they confirmed early 2023 is PS VR2's release window. And that's all they said. So this is still very much falling in line with what they've been doing, which is drip feeding PS VR2 info and not saying much else. Which is fine, especially because at this point it's nice to get an official confirmation of early 2023, because the past 6 or 8 months it seemed fairly obvious. So even if they wanted to do holiday 2022, it's something where it just seemed like early 2023 was going to be where this thing would end up. We also had plenty of analysts chiming in saying that based on lead time and parts procurement, and also developers and their progress, that it seemed like early 2023 is where this thing was going to end up, and now we at least have official confirmation of that, which is good. Now, another PSVR 2 news, excuse me, next month it looks like TGS 2022 will be the first time PSVR 2 will be playable to the public with a demo of Resident Evil Village, which is going to be the Castle Dimitrescu section in the game, and that's going to run from September 15th to the 18th, so this will be the first time that the public gets to play PSVR 2, give some impressions, talk about it, and also the timeline alone kind of gives us a good idea of how Sony's getting closer and closer to having to talk about the headset, right? So we already know that Sony's not going to have a major presence at TGS this year, but the timing is still fairly close to that potential PlayStation showcase, which, it seems all but expected that the next time they have a showcase, they're certainly going to spend a good portion of time talking about PlayStation VR2 during the showcase, right? So, regardless of how this all pans out, they're still getting close to, really revealing more and more details about the headset. So, not going to be too much more waiting to finally hear more on-the-ground experience about what it's like to not only play it, but also more launch games or games that might be ready for launch and new game announcements, things like that. Exciting to see some real progress here. Now, of course, this past Tuesday was Jeff Keighley's Gamescom opening night live presentation, which was about 2 hours long, and it was okay, right? Nothing fantastic. Probably would have been a lot more exciting if some of these things weren't leaked prior, like Dead Island 2, which, that showed up with retailer listings like 2 weeks ago or something. So that would have been a cool, like, out of nowhere, hey, the game's back kind of thing, but either way, that was kind of a bummer. And then also, well, arguably the biggest thing here was actually a PlayStation announcement, the only PlayStation announcement, which Sony typically likes to have at least one thing for these Jeff Keighley shows, and it was another thing that was leaked prior, or at least was more of a rumor, which was the DualSense Pro controller. That was a rumor from a few weeks ago, and now it's confirmed. It's the DualSense Edge controller, and we have all the details from the PlayStation blog. So this thing has a lot going for it. Namely, you've got customizable controls, so you can remap or deactivate certain button inputs. You can also adjust stick sensitivity in dead zones, and then the L2 and R2 buttons can also be adjusted to reduce travel distance for faster inputs. You'll have the ability to save multiple control profiles. There's a dedicated button that allows you to easily adjust the controller setup, preset profiles, game audio, and chat balance. The analog stick caps and back buttons can be changed out. 3 versions for the stick caps, whereas the back button will offer a half dome or a traditional lever setup. And then the analog stick modules can be replaced as well, with those being sold separately. And for those confused about this, it's the entire assembly, including the potentiometer underneath the sticks, which is often a failure point for many with stick drifting issues. So the whole thing comes out, it's confirmed, it's on video. It will replace the entire assembly without really taking apart the controller. And also the DualSense Edge will come with a USB Type-C braided cable and a carrying case. More news in the months ahead, so no price or release date confirmed just yet, which that might be a point of contention. There's a few problems here, which I guess first we should mention. There's no rubberized texture or grips on the handles, which that's something everyone really loves about the Elite series, which I agree, that feels really good. It's a nice premium controller. That's not here, although the DualSense still has a textured back. Well, the normal controllers do, so this one is pretty much the same thing, which is fine. There's also the gloss black trim piece in the middle, which I love. Glossy black trim pieces and products and things like that. I feel like I'm in the minority there. I think it looks really nice, but I get it when it's a product that you have to touch often. So there's the PS button and mute button on there. So yeah, it's going to be a fingerprint magnet. I understand that complaint there. But when it comes to the price, I'm seeing a lot of people guess where this thing is going to fall, and you have to look at what's on the market currently. An Elite series runs you about $180 USD, and then SCUF controllers, they easily get in the neighborhood of $200 to $250 USD. So really start putting it into your head that this controller is going to cost a good amount of money. There's really no getting around that. It would be nice if it was cheaper, but just kind of put it in your head that, that's the typical range for these kind of premium controllers with back buttons and things like that, which for the back buttons, that might be the biggest problem for some people, is that there's only 2. And, for most controllers in this price range, and you would assume if it's going to fall in this price range, it should have this, but most of them have 4 back buttons. So when it comes to really, getting serious about competitive play and getting down your response time and your inputs and things like that, for a lot of players, 4 back buttons is pretty much a must, or it's vital. So that's why this controller might be in a really rock and a hard place, because for more casual consumers, you might not really feel the need to spend this kind of cash on a bunch of features that you're not going to use. And some people feel like back buttons are like foreign to hold and use, right? Sometimes you just don't really get used to incorporating that into your gameplay. But there's that, and then also if you're not speaking more directly to that core audience with not offering 4 buttons, that's where the controller's in this really weird spot. So it'll be interesting to see what this thing, or I guess how it's received when it eventually comes out and once there's an announced price tag for this thing. But I will say, I think it looks gorgeous. I love the black face buttons contrasting against the white panels on the side of the controller. I love the gloss black trim. I think this thing looks just absolutely gorgeous. And so when it comes to presentation, build quality, swapping out the sticks, and having all the other features with at least 2 back buttons, that might be enough for some, but I do feel that 4 buttons would have really made this thing a complete pro-style DualSense, which, again, 2 buttons might be enough, but 4 is usually the standard here, and that seems to be the one big complaint. But we'll see how it's received when it finally is released. Moving on to easily our biggest news story of this past week, the PS5's recommended retail price is going up. It's confirmed in most territories except the United States. So over on the PlayStation blog, the SIA president and CEO Jim Ryan said, and I quote here, "The global economic environment is a challenge that many of you around the world are no doubt experiencing. We're seeing high global inflation rates, as well as adverse currency trends impacting consumers and creating pressure on many industries. Based on these challenging economic conditions, SIA has made the difficult decision to increase the recommended retail price of PlayStation 5 in select markets across Europe, Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, as well as Canada. There will be no price increase in the United States." So across the board, we're looking at about a 10% increase on average. Europe went up €50, UK £30 sterling, Japan 5,000 yen, Australia $50, China 400, Canada 20. Not too bad for Canada, but Japan definitely got hit pretty hard, where it's up like 23-25% or something like that. Japan's PS5 launch price, adjusted for today's USD, was actually pretty good, like $360 something, which that's why it was a big increase, and now it's more in line with today's USD. And at least in terms of some additional updates to the story that are at least related, Microsoft confirmed to VGC and Windows Central that Xbox Series S and X pricing will remain the same. And also Ampere's research director, Piers Harding-Rolls, also put out some comments suggesting Sony likely won't change sales forecasts, as pent-up demand means there will be a minimal impact on sales. So that's what we're dealing with right now, and well, it's pretty crazy. I am definitely surprised. There's no doubt about that, because we just had this story come up during Sony's financial report, where during the Q&A, Sony's CFO Hiroki Totoki was asked about this. He gave kind of an indirect answer, and more or less some people took his wording as, "Oh, so you're considering raising PS5's price tag," which at the time I was like, well, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think worst case scenario, what we're looking at is Japan does go up in price, which, yeah, that happened, but I really thought Sony was going to eat whatever costs that they're seeing right now behind the scenes and just do possibly more of what they're doing right now, which is, bundles, right? Currently we've got the Horizon bundle, and more often than not, it's the only one you can buy reliably, even though I just saw the other day standard PS5s were in stock on PS Direct for a few hours. In fact, I think it was up for like 12, 13 something hours. It was crazy. That was the longest time I saw base PS5s available. But the point is, I figured, okay, if it was really bad for Sony, they might go for just guaranteeing a higher average spend per box by doing strictly bundles, which, for Horizon here in North America, or here in the United States, I should say, $549 for the Horizon bundle. In the UK, where PS5 every week is charting, or rather, there's a lot of PS5 supply going out, and so when the charts come out for game sales, which that tracks games bundled into consoles, Horizon is number one for the past 3-4 weeks because they're selling so many Horizon PS5 bundles. So I really thought that's how they were going to approach it, but it seems that is not the case. And some might be wondering why the United States. Well, not only is this, whether you like it or not, a very important market, and certainly one where historically Microsoft is the strongest here, and this is where Sony is pretty much neck and neck with them. And so Microsoft's doing quite good right now. So Sony not only wants to stay very competitive, but also it's something where and we saw this in their financial report, but it's the value of the dollar. So, right now it's something where that last report, their operating income was down 37%. And one of the things that they put in there for their forecasts was that it's based on the foreign exchange rate, that being one of the main reasons why they lowered their forecast for operating income. So it's quite clear that this was certainly on their mind for a bit, and they were thinking about what they should do. And well, the other thing is that, well, obviously this is not good news, right? It sucks. I would love for PS5 to be as cheap as possible, so it's not great. I'm not thrilled with this. Historically in the console space, these things should be getting cheaper over time, not only for the bill of materials for the console manufacturer, but they pass those savings on to the consumer, and that's great. So it's kind of a win-win where they sell more boxes and people can buy consoles for a cheaper price over time. That's always been how it works. And so this is certainly an abnormal situation, although I will say PS4 did have this happen one time, or no, two times. It was once in Canada and then another time in India, if I remember correctly. It's certainly an abnormal thing, no doubt, but that's normally how it should go, is that consoles get cheaper. But anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is that, unfortunately, I do agree with Ampere Analysis in that this is not going to do much in the short term because they can get away with it. There is pent-up demand for PS5. It's still something where even after it sits for 12 hours, it will sell out, but they are making more, and I just hope it very much is a short-term thing where they don't keep these prices that much higher for too long, because consoles should historically come down. And I would just hope this very much is a short-term problem, which I expect. But I'm just so surprised that Sony really decided to not eat the cost. This is what really agitates me, because it's like you really don't want to be the only guy doing this, because when we're looking at the big three, Nintendo, for the most part, can get a pass here because they're actually selling a box that, or rather a bunch of handhelds that have had the same MSRP since launch, which that came out in 2017. They're selling the same hardware for the same price. They've only, been able to cost down by offering a Switch Lite. But if you want a basic Switch, it's cost you $300 since 2017. So despite, bill materials going up and down for the Switch, I mean, they've got to be in a very comfortable range where even if it's going up, they don't have to raise prices and they don't necessarily have to lower them either. That explains Nintendo. Microsoft, this is what I was getting at in that episode about the PS5 price rumors, that we all know Microsoft is not going to do it, or at least I would be. Here's the thing, I'm surprised that Sony did it. I would be blown away shocked if Microsoft raised prices, because right now their long game is spend, loss lead, do what it takes. And so it's like, if anybody was going to do this, it was Sony, and it's like, do you really want to be the only ones doing this? And it seems that is the case. That's what's really surprising to me, is that they're going to allow themselves to be the only one doing this and take on an extreme amount of bad press, which is what is happening right now. And it certainly doesn't bode well for this, running narrative that Sony is in this arrogant stage again, which that's the weird dichotomy here, is that I'm seeing comparisons of Sony back to the PS3 days. And I think when people say that, they don't remember how bad PlayStation 3 was. Sony would love, the PS3 Sony would have loved to see the same success that they're having right now. PS5 is successful. That's the big difference. They're still selling. It's a great product. There's awesome games that have come out. There's awesome games that are going to come out. There's likely a showcase around the corner. They're still doing good things with PS5, which I think are being severely overlooked by these practices that are really starting to agitate and annoy people, and it's doing long-term harm for the brand in a not so favorable way. So I'm not thrilled with how this is playing out, but hopefully it's very much a short-term thing. And well, I guess now it's a matter of, we'll see how long it takes for them to eventually bring the price down back to where it was. Japan, that might not be a reasonable option, but hopefully in other markets it does readjust sooner rather than later. Now, fittingly, I guess our next news story should be that Sony's being sued for £5 billion in the UK for allegedly ripping off customers. which this is not at all related to the story that we just had. So this one, the lawsuit claims, or rather it's being opened up by the consumer rights advocate Alex Neil on behalf of 9 million people. And the claim states that consumers in the UK have been overcharged for digital goods by £5 billion over the course of the last 6 years, which the main point being brought up is the 30% cut that Sony takes from third-party sales on their stores. Alex Neil says to Sky News, and I quote here, "The game is up for Sony PlayStation. With this legal action, I am standing up for the millions of UK people who have been unwittingly overcharged. We believe Sony has abused its position and ripped off its customers." And that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of info out there about this lawsuit and what it entails, but based on what we do have, I am confused because the point they're making doesn't add up. In fact, I think they phrased it differently than the way I just wrote it, because 30% is based on, they said customers are being overcharged by 30% or something like that. Like, okay, so the 30% is a standard industry cut that Sony takes from developers and publishers on their store, and also just regular sales of games, right? That's been the standard for, pretty much for as long as games have been around. And there's been different cuts when we talk about 25-something years ago, right? But generally, we're talking about standard games at retail, and nowadays digital games, which is what this lawsuit is reflecting, based on a recent act in the UK that primarily targets digital goods. So I think that's why they're going back 6-something years for this particular lawsuit. But that is the industry standard across most storefronts. So Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Steam. The only one is Epic, actually, where they're doing 12%. But Apple was in this hot seat for a bit. And then also PlayStation had a similar lawsuit in the United States, I think, which most recently was, I think the judge threw that one out, but I'm just not sure what angle they're getting at here, because in theory, this industry standard cut is not only it's between Sony and the developers, but also developers and publishers set the prices on these stores. There might be a case to be made based on regional variances and the exchange rate and what games are being charged across different storefronts in different countries, but that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about just the United Kingdom, where the prices are set on a publisher by publisher basis, and that cut happens between Sony and the publisher. So I'm not sure what angle they're getting at here, unless they're kind of talking about how Sony limits, and I believe they're completely done with this. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't sell digital keys anymore for a game-by-game basis at retail or to third party in general, right? Which Microsoft and Nintendo still do. So you could buy a digital game from a local store or CD keys or wherever else. As far as I know, Sony stopped that quite a bit ago. Maybe that's what they're talking about, because you have to go through the PlayStation Store directly, but that's not what's being claimed here. So I just don't get what angle they're coming from. I'm certainly by no means a legal expert, but my gut reaction to seeing this was, okay, like, I don't know exactly how far this is going to go. I think it's not frivolous per se, just I'm not sure. We need more info, because what we're hearing doesn't make any sense. Maybe there's a lot more to it. We'll see how it plays out, but my gut reaction was I think Sony might have an easier time defending this than one might think. Anyway, getting into some game news and going back to Gamescom, we have a 10-minute trailer, gameplay walkthrough thing of Forspoken, kind of like what you would see for a State of Play, and had some commentary over it about the story, Frey and why she's in this world, and some combat stuff, some traversal stuff. Pretty good overview of the game, although we've already seen a good portion of it already, so I think if you're already sort of feeling one way about this game, this footage might not really change it for you. I'm still kind of in the same place where I want to like it. It looks good, it looks interesting, but it's so hard to really judge gameplay until you're really sitting there and giving it a try. And so that's where I am with Forspoken. I'm not nearly as hard on it as others, but this footage doesn't really shift the opinion, I would say. Or if you weren't feeling that good on it, I don't think this would really change it for you. But seeing a lot of this game, and so seems like they might have been very much on track to hit their original release date, but as we discussed, it seems like it was really more appropriate to just push it away from God of War, which a lot of games are now doing, except Sonic Frontiers. Very bold of Sega. We'll see how that plays out for them. Next up, the launch trailer for The Last of Us Part 1 is out, so good time to remind folks this game is right around the corner, coming out very soon, and this trailer shows more scenes in the game that we have not seen thus far. Still looking absolutely gorgeous and nutty. It's still something to keep in mind. This is Naughty Dog's first foray into purely a PlayStation 5 only title. I'm sure it will look gorgeous. And also we found out the review embargo, that is August 31st, which I am certain that'll be another very fun conversation to have surrounding that compared to all the other conversations we've had so far about this game. I think it'll be more exciting over time once the price tag isn't the big point of contention, but I'm certainly still interested to see the entire game from start to finish on PlayStation 5 completely remade, because there are certainly some environments where there's a dramatic difference from what, again, was principally a PlayStation 3 game under the hood. And now that we have the launch trailer, not too much more waiting to do. Now let's get into some PlayStation Productions news. We have a fair amount here. First up being, we finally have our first look at The Last of Us HBO TV series. It was part of an HBO Max sizzle reel, so it was actually near the end, which bodes well for how HBO feels about this show. And it's very short, only like 15, 20 seconds, if that. A lot of fast cuts and also like 2-3 lines being read between Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal. But we finally see them in motion, and just that short clip alone, looking good, definitely excited and interested for sure. But even that, like, it's not, we can't judge too much. There's really nothing being shown at all. So whether you're feeling down on it or not, I would say, like, you got to give it more of a chance than a 20-second teaser. But definitely having it near the end of that sizzle reel, you can tell HBO is really backing the show in a big way, which now it's sort of, coming into my head of, like, if this show becomes wildly successful, it's certainly going to outpace the game story unless they really, really slow down what's going to happen in part 2 and, add a lot more additional story beats. But usually these things, if they're really successful, they can outdo the source material. So I'm starting to wonder if that's a real possibility if this becomes as successful as HBO is hoping it will be. Now, as far as PlayStation Productions adaptations go, this one was initially surprising, although makes sense when you think about it, which is that Deadline is reporting a Days Gone movie is being developed at PlayStation Productions. So they're claiming that the actor that would play Deacon St. John is Sam Heughan, the Outlander actor, and that the screenwriter and producer Sheldon Turner, best known for doing things like X-Men First Class and also The Longest Yard, they would be adapting this into a film. The script is apparently, and I quote here, a love ballad to motorcycle movies, the bike being Deacon's sole form of transportation, his horse in this would-be modern-day Western. So, yeah, initially you might look at this and go, okay, well, they didn't want anything to do with the games beyond the first one, so why a movie? But you can't really make that kind of comparison. Of course, the world building, the IP, the story, it might lend itself better to being adapted to a movie instead of the vastly more complicated scenario of greenlighting a multi-million-dollar video game and as a sequel, right? So we know Sony did not greenlight Days Gone 2, but a movie might make sense. It is their property, and at least in the context of this game where it's zombies or really freakers, right? So you've got freakers, you've got this relationship with Deacon and the bike. You can see the angle they're kind of going with this to make it a bit more unique. So yeah, it makes sense. The other unfortunate part of this, though, is that we are seeing that, yet again, Hollywood, if it wasn't obvious, they will certainly go with a larger name to put them on the project if this is to be believed that it's Sam Heughan, which, it should be Sam Witwer. He played Deacon in the games, and he is an actor, so, I mean, it would be... That would be perfect, but we know how this stuff usually goes down, so at least when it comes to PlayStation Productions projects, we really should, remember that they're likely not ever going to pick the sort of fan favorite here, especially if it's not already a really high-profile actor. That's just kind of the way it is, unfortunately. Sam Witwer would have been perfect to play Deacon because he is Deacon. But yeah, I mean, it was surprising at first, but I can see how this would be a PS Productions thing. And now we just have to wait for more official info to come out. Now, in all seriousness, the really shocking thing here is that Deadline is also reporting a Gravity Rush movie is being made. Gravity Rush, an adaptation of the 2012 PlayStation Vita game that technically that one got a sequel, but put this on my list of things I did not think were even on the table. Like, this was definitely not going to happen, and in fairness, it's still a rumor, but Deadline has been extremely accurate with these movie reports. So, yeah, they're claiming a Gravity Rush movie is on the way. They mentioned that Anna Mastro is working, or she's directing this one, and the script is by Emily Jerome. And there's actually some evidence to this because Anna Mastro was doing an interview like 1-2 years ago where she mentioned she was working on some sort of a top secret project with PlayStation on a female-driven action movie, and that that was something she couldn't talk about at the time, but she was very excited for it. Turns out it was Cat and Gravity Rush. So yeah, I'm very surprised. Did not think at all this was like even possible or being considered. Gravity Rush, like, out of all the PlayStation IP, I mean, cool. I'm not sitting here saying like I don't want this. In fact, now that I know that it might be coming, I'm like, oh, well, let's see how this plays out. But it's just really something where it's like, okay, Gravity Rush, did not see that coming, but let's see how this one plays out. Now, with that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about you all from this past week. And our Tuesday video was actually a Monday and Wednesday video for the PlayStation Store on PS3 and PS Vita. So if you want to reminisce, look back at those old stores, learn about the history, the oddities of them, then go check out those videos. But coming up, we should be fairly close to a PlayStation Showcase announcement. Not only is there rumors and things like that going on, but really, if Sony does repeat history here on the last 2 years, then we should be very close to the announcement as is. So until that happens, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Bonecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.